طيب واضح يا شباب؟ الصورة واضحة؟
كل شيء واضح، يعطيك العافية.
طيب إذا في أي مشكلة اتكلموا معي صوتيا لأني لا أرى الكومنتس حقتكم، أنا عامل شير للسكرين ما حرى أي كومنتس. في نهاية المحاضرة ممكن أشوف الكومنتس، لكن at the time being I will not be able to see your comments. If you have any problem, just raise your voice. Okay. First, you all know, or probably most of you know, what do we mean by physiology. The general definition of physiology is to study the functions of living matter. So we have human physiology, which means to study the different function of human being organs. However, physiology of plants will consider the functions of the plants, and the physiology of other animals will consider how the organs of these animals they work. So probably to understand the word physiology in depth, we need to revise some basic informations. If you can see this diagram, as you can see here, this is the human body. The human body is made of organs. For example, this is the gastrointestinal organ. We have the the systems, the gastrointestinal system, which consider with digestion and absorption of nutrients. We have the respiratory system, which concern mainly with gas exchange between the atmosphere and the blood. We have, for example, the cardiovascular system, which concern with transport of blood all over the body, and therefore transport of nutrients and oxygen and so on. We have the renal system, which concern with filtration of toxins and other waste product outside the body. So we have so many systems. Each system is made of organs. For example, the GIT, the gastrointestinal system, is made of the stomach, of the large and small intestine, and there is accessory glands like the liver and so on. So each system is made of organ, and each organ is made of tissue. Probably in the history lecture or lectures, you will study different types of tissue. We have the connective tissue, the epithelial tissue, the nervous tissue, the muscular tissue, and so on. So organs are made of tissues, which themselves are made of cells. The tissues are made of cells, and within each cells we have what we call organelles. For example, the mitochondria is an organelle, the Golgi apparatus, the endoplasmic reticulum. A lot of organelles are found within the cells, and these organelles themselves are made of macromolecules, which are made of molecules. So this is a functional organization of our body. Our body is made of systems, which are made of organs, which are made of tissues, and the tissues themselves are made of cells, and the cells are made of organelles. What are the major systems in our body? First, we have the integumentary system. The skin which covers our body is called the integumentary system. It is mainly protective. It will protect yourself from the external environment, from chemical, biological, and physical hazards. Biological like viruses, bacteria, and so on. Chemical like a lot of toxin bound in the environment, and physical like heat and other radiation and so on. Then we have the nervous system. and the endocrine system. These two systems together, they are called the control systems. Why? Because they are involved in control of our body functions. And later on, when you study this system, you will know how these systems control our body. Then we have the musculoskeletal system, which concern with the support of our body and locomotion, the movement and support of the body. Then the circulatory system, which is made of the heart and the blood vessels, and this mainly concerned with transport of nutrients, gases all through the body. That's why we call it transport system. Then we have three systems which are in contact with the external environment. The first, the respiratory system. It has so many functions. The most important is to deliver oxygen to the body and to wash out carbon dioxide from our blood. The digestive system, which mainly concerns with digestion of food and thereafter absorption of nutrients. And the urinary system, again, it has so many functions. We'll discuss this later in the next course, inshallah. It is mainly concerned with regulation of different parameters in our body, and the most important is to get rid of waste product and toxin from the body. So these three systems together, they are in contact with the external environment. They are in contact with the external environment. Then we have the immune system, and we'll discuss this in full detail, inshallah, after 3-5 lectures. We have an innate immunity and acquired immunity, and they are mainly concerned with protection of our body from microorganisms. Lastly, we have the reproductive system. Reproductive system, this is made of the uterus and in the other accessory organs and the testes and other organs in the male, and they are mainly concerned with reproduction. So this is a revision of what we have said. This is the integumentary system. It is mainly made of the skin, which cover our body. The control system in our body. This is the nervous system, which is made of the central nervous system, which is made of the brain and spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system, which is made of nerves. Then we have the endocrine system. The endocrine glands. These are the pituitary, the thyroid, the supraadrenal, the pancreas, and the gonads. These are the main or endocrine glands in our body. Then we have two systems which support our body and also concerned with the movement. This is the skeletal system, which is made of the bones, and the muscular system, which covers these bones and is responsible for locomotion. Then the transport system, the cardiovascular system, as you can see in the slide to the left, in the picture to the left, is made of the heart and the blood vessels, whether these are veins, venules, artery and arterioles, and the capillaries and so on. And to the right, you have what we call the lymphatic system, another drainage system. It's made mainly of the lymph nodes and the lymphatic vessels. Both are concerned with transport of body fluid in our body. The three systems which are in contact with the external environment, these are the digestive system and the respiratory system and the renal system. All these systems, they are in contact with the external environment, and they are very essential for our life. Lastly, the reproduction system, which are responsible for reproduction. In the male, it is made of the testis and seminal vesicles, prostate, and other organs. In the female, this is made of the uterus, the ovaries, and the vagina, and so on. So these are the main systems in our body. Over the following lecture, inshallah, we will start to discuss system by system, and we will understand how each of these systems they work, how they work. You will study this system in more detail. But before that, we have to introduce some basic information. Let us start with our body composition. What are the main components that made our body? Our body is mainly made of water. In a 70 kilogram body weight, about 42 kilogram is made of water. إذا في شخص وزنه 70 كيلو يا شباب 42 كيلو عبارة عن water. So water constitute about 60% of our body weight. Water constitute on average about 60% of our weight is made of water. So more than half of our body is made of water. If we consider what we call lean body mass, what is lean body mass? Lean body mass is your body without fat. If you remove fat from your body, what remains is called lean body mass. So lean body mass by definition means your body weight without fat. Water constitutes about 75% of your lean body mass. Water constitutes about 75% of your lean body mass, or 60% of your total body mass or your total body weight. So the most abundant component or the most abundant things in your body is water. Then proteins. Proteins constitute about 18% of your total body weight or 20% of your lean body mass. If we consider a body with a weight of 70 kilogram, about 12.6 kilogram will be proteins. And the mass of fat is equivalent to proteins. Again, it is about 18% of your total body weight. And if we consider a body with a 70 kilogram weight, about 12.6 will be fat. Here we leave this empty. Why? ليش ما عبرنا عن الفات من اللين بودي ماس؟ واحد يكون متابعني.
الآن من ضمن التعريف قلنا إنه الوزن يصير بدون دهون.
Yes, very good. Yes, very good. Because by definition, lean body mass means your weight without fat. The least abundant thing in your body is minerals. Minerals like what? Like sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium, and so on. This constitutes about 4% of your total body weight or 5% of your lean body mass, which is equivalent about 2.8 kilogram. If your weight is 70, about 2.8 kilogram will be made of minerals. So this is the composition of our body in general. As you can see, water is the most abundant thing in our body. وَجَعَلْنَا مِنَ الْمَاءِ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ حَيٍّ. The water is most abundant, and this water is not constant. It differs between people, and the difference in the content of water between people is mainly dependent into two things: into gender, whether you are male or female. This is the first things which made the variation, and the age. Water content differ according to the age. And this table will explain the variation of total body weight, total body water. As you can see here, water is almost always more in males than females, except during early stages of life. At birth and during childhood and adolescence, the water content is equal in males and females. But after puberty, from the age of about 18 years old and thereafter, the water becomes more abundant in males compared with females. Why? Because the fat content in female after puberty is more than the fat content in the male. And because fat contains less water, that's why females will have less water compared with the male. But before puberty, the fat content between male and female is almost equal. That's why both males and females, they have the same water content. So in general, before the age of puberty, water content in male and female, they are equal, almost equal. After puberty, because females, they start to deposit fat more than males, they will have less water. So this is number one, the difference between males and females. As you can see, water is most abundant at birth. About 82% of your weight is water at the time of birth. Within the first 2-3 days, 82% of your weight is made of water. Then water content starts to decrease during childhood up to adolescence. The water content in both male and female is about 70% of the weight. Then from the age of 18 and thereafter, water content, first there is minimum increase in the male and then they start to decrease. يعني within the first يعني 30, almost 59 and 61, there is not much difference. And thereafter it starts to decrease. In the females, there is continuous decrease all through life. So this is a pattern of change. Before reproduction, before puberty, the water content is almost equal in male and female, and thereafter water content starts to decrease gradually. And always after puberty, the water content in male is more than female. So, if we represent our water in our body, water is found inside the cells and outside the cells. So the total body water in our body, you can find this water inside the cells and outside the cells. Generally speaking, physiologists, they subdivide total body water into intracellular fluid. From the name, this is water found within the cells. And extracellular fluid, by definition, this is water found outside the cells. Why do we differentiate between these two compartments, intracellular fluid and extracellular fluid? Because they found that the concentration of different substances inside the cells differ than outside the cells. So different cells, whatsoever the type of cells, whatsoever the location of cells, whether found within the muscle or within the liver or within the kidney, the concentration of fluid inside the cell, they are almost the same. So they put them together and they call them intracellular fluid. And the fluid found outside the cells, we call it extracellular fluid. Extracellular fluid. The extracellular fluid itself is subdivided into two. First, the plasma. And you all know that plasma is found inside the vessels. Plasma is found inside blood vessels. So the fluid found inside the blood vessels, we call it plasma. The other name, we call it intravascular compartment. We call it intravascular compartment or plasma. So extracellular fluid, number one, is found inside the vessels. We call this plasma. The other, we call it interstitial fluid. Interstitial fluid, this is the fluid in between the cells and outside the vessels. So you can see these are the cells and these are the vessels. And the fluid in blue, this is the interstitial fluid. Interstitial fluid, this is the fluid in between the cells and outside the vessels. So extracellular fluid is subdivided into two. Plasma, by definition, this is the fluid found inside the blood vessels. And interstitial fluid, this is the fluid in between the cells and outside the blood vessels. So, if we consider this square as total body weight, total body water, زي ما قلنا في السلايد الأولى, on average, it's about 60% of the total body weight. 60% of your total body weight is made of water. وقلنا في variation يا اخواننا بيختلف على الميل والفيميل والايج زي ما قلنا في السلايد، لكن on average about 60% of your body weight is made of water. If we consider the physiological body weight, about 70 kilogram. 60% of 70 kilogram is equal to 42 kilogram. So if we represent the total body water by this square, قلنا هو عبارة عن 60% من الويت حق الجسم، وإذا الويت كان 70 حيساوي لنا 42 كيلوغرام اوف ووتر. طبعا كيلوغرام اوف ووتر يساوي 1 لتر، يعني كيلوغرام اوف ووتر بيساوي 1 لتر لانه كثافه الماء تساوي 1. فلما نقول 42 كيلوغرام اوف ووتر we can say again 42 liter. Why? Because 1 kilogram of water equal to 1 liter. So the total body water is either found inside the cells, we call it intracellular fluid compartment, and this is about 40% of the total body water. Sorry, 40% of the total body weight. يعني تلتين الماء الموجود حقنا, 2/3 of the water in our body is found inside the cells. وإذا كان 60% 2/3 منها حتكون 40%. So intracellular fluid, about 40% of the total body weight is found inside the cells. We call it intracellular fluid. And if we consider the physiological body weight about 70 kilogram, then the intracellular fluid compartment will be about 28 kilogram of water or 28 liter of water. The other water is found outside the cells. We call it extracellular fluid. We call it extracellular fluid compartment. This is about 1/3 of the total body water. يعني هيكون 20% of the total body weight. وإذا اعتبرنا الويت 70 هيكون about 14 kilogram of water or 14 liter of water. This extracellular fluid itself is subdivided into two compartments. About 3/4 of the extracellular fluid is found in between the cells and outside the vessels. We call it interstitial fluid. If the interstitial fluid بيساوي 15% of the total body weight، وإذا اعتبرنا الفيزيولوجيكال weight هيكون about 10.5 liter of water. And 1/4 is found inside the vessels. We call it intravascular compartment or plasma, and this constitutes about 5% of the total body weight or 3.5 liter of water. So this is the distribution of water in our body. In summary, they are found either inside the cells or outside the cells. So we have two names, intra and extracellular fluid compartments. And this constitutes 2/3 and 1/3 of the total body water, and here 40% and 20%. The extracellular fluid, 3/4 is found in interstitial fluid, and 1/4 inside the vessels. We call it plasma. So, in most of physiology books, you will come across these two terms: internal and external environment. Internal and external environment. What do we mean by internal and external environment? If you consider the cells, the fluid that surround the cells, we call it interstitial fluid. And this is constitute the internal environment of your body. The smallest functional unit in your body is the cells. And what surrounds these cells is called the interstitial fluid. That is why we call it the internal environment. We call it the internal environment. So internal environment means the surrounding of the cells. And we know that we call this is the interstitial fluid. يبقى دي البيئة الداخلية. البيئة الداخلية هي السوائل المحيطة بالخلايا. This is the internal environment. It is the internal environment. In contradistinction, the external environment is the environment that surrounds your whole body. Your whole body is surrounded by the external environment. And you all know your body is surrounded by the external environment, which is made of physical factors. It is affected by physical factors like heat, light, radiations. Again, it is affected by chemical factors like food, water, carbon dioxide, oxygen, toxins, and so on. And we have biological factors. Again, the external environment is affected by bacteria, viruses, parasites, and so on. Again, the external environment is affected by psychosocial factors, by customs and beliefs, So some tribes, they believe in certain food, so they start to take that food and to not to take other type of food. Some customs like circumcisions, some traditions can affect your external environment. So in our body, when we study physiology, we should differentiate between two things. Between the external environment, which is variable. The external environment can be hot, can be cold. You can have low oxygen, you can have high oxygen. Sometimes you start to start fasting, like for example in Ramadan you will not take water. Other time you can take water. Sometimes you get ill because you have bacterial infection. And all these things can affect your external environment. So usually your external environment is not constant. There is variation in the external environment. But in spite of this variation, the fluid that surrounds your cell should be constant. So whether you are in high altitude where there is low oxygen or in low altitude where there is enough oxygen, your internal environment should have constant oxygen. يعني رغم الاختلافات اللي ممكن تحصل في الاكسترنال environment لازم الانترنال environment حقتك تكون ثابته. In spite of the variation of the external environment, your internal environment should be constant. إذا كنت جيعان أو عطشان, you should have adequate oxygen, adequate glucose, adequate nutrients, adequate temperature, adequate everything in your internal environment should be constant. Okay? So all the time you should differentiate between two environments: the internal environment, the fluid that surround the cell, and the external environment, the environment that surround your body as a whole. To be alive and well, your internal environment should be constant. They should not change. They should not change. يا اخواننا اذا كنت قاعد في راس جبل الاكسجين حقك حيكون قليل، لكن despite of this البودي حقنا بيعمل compensation. Still الاكسجين around your cell will be constant. It will not change. اذا كنت جيعان صايم في رمضان, still the internal environment, the fluids that surround your cell will have adequate nutrients. إذا كان الوضع حر شديد أو برد شديد, still the fluids that surround your cells should have a constant temperature, 37 degrees centigrade. So in spite of the variation in the external environment, your internal environment should be constant. Otherwise, you can get disease or you can die. So to be alive and well, your internal environment should always be constant. Constant means it should have the adequate temperature, adequate glucose concentration, adequate amino acid concentration, adequate fatty acid concentration, adequate oxygen concentration, adequate pH. The concentration of different electrolytes should be adequate. Everything should be constant. Otherwise, you will not be alive and well. So, in spite of the variation that may take place in the external environment, our body has its own physiology to maintain the consistency of the internal environment. And from here, it comes the concept of homeostasis. What is homeostasis? Homeo comes from the name home, and the home of our body, we mean by home the internal environment. What is the internal environment? The fluid that surround your cells. Stasis means stabilization. So the term homeostasis means the process of stabilization of the internal environment. The process by which you maintain the consistency of the internal environment, we call it homeostasis. يعني, for example, if you develop fever, the fever will start to increase your temperature. Your temperature, if you increase above the normal limit, you will get disease and you can die thereafter. So in our body, there should be a process by which we can maintain our body temperature. If you are fasting Ramadan, if you are not eating, in spite of that process of not eating, in spite of being fasting, there is certain process in your body by which we can maintain your blood glucose. We can maintain the consistency of glucose concentration. If you have vomiting or diarrhea by which you lose a lot of water, still we should compensate for that so that the internal environment should not change. The interstitial fluid should not change significantly. The process by which we stabilize the internal environment, we call it homeostasis. We call it what? We call it homeostasis. Let us discuss how can we maintain our homeostasis. If you are following me, if we represent the fluid inside the cells by this is the fluid found inside the cells. And we said that the fluid inside the cell is surrounded by another type of fluid. We call it what? Interstitial fluid. And here the fluid inside the vessels. Interstitial fluid is the fluid outside the cells and outside the vessels. So the usual thing, the metabolism takes place inside the cells. For metabolism, we need oxygen. The cell will take oxygen and nutrients. It will be metabolized inside the cells to get energy, which is essential for life. As a result, the cells will produce carbon dioxide and waste product. طيب واحد ممكن يسألني ما دام السيلز بتاخد أكسجين ونيوترينز from the interstitial fluid, how can we maintain the consistency of oxygen and nutrients in the interstitial fluid? We maintain it by getting oxygen and nutrients from plasma. يعني الأكسجين والنيوترينز تجي للبلازما، من البلازما تجي للinterstitial fluid, and from interstitial fluid it will go into the cells. So by this we maintain the consistency of oxygen. The oxygen will not decrease if it go into the cells. Why? Because it will come from plasma. Likewise, glucose, amino acid, fatty acid, and other nutrients, they will not decrease in concentration if they go into the cells. Why? Because they will be replaced from plasma. The cells take oxygen and nutrients, and they will produce carbon dioxide and waste product. These will not accumulate into the interstitial fluid, they will go into the plasma. So the interstitial fluid will be constant. There will be no change in oxygen, nutrients, carbon dioxide, and waste products. Why? Because there is continuous replacement in this side and there is continuous washout in this side. For plasma, again, if you take oxygen, plasma concentration of oxygen will decrease, but this will not take place because oxygen will be delivered from the lungs and nutrients will be delivered from the GIT. So this will maintain the consistency of oxygen and nutrient in the plasma. Likewise, carbon dioxide will not accumulate in the plasma because it will be washed out mainly in the respiratory system, and waste product will be lost mainly in the kidney and other excretory systems. So this is how can we maintain the consistency of the internal environment. The fluid that surrounds your cells will not change significantly. It will not change significantly. Why? Because there is a lot of processes we will study these processes in the rest of this course. How can we maintain our internal environment? So it is very, very, very important to maintain the consistency of the internal environment, what we call homeostasis. This is another diagram which will show you how can we maintain the homeostasis. You can see here, this is the GIT which delivers nutrients. This is, for example, the nephron of the kidney which take out waste product. Here in the lungs we can take out carbon dioxide, we can deliver oxygen and so on. So far, is it clear for you? Do we have any question? معايا يا شباب؟
معاك دكتور، معاك.
معاك دكتور.
طيب, do you want rest and we continue after a while or we continue? ضليت أنا تقريبا نص ساعة معكم، تاخذوا راحة ولا نواصل طوالي؟
لا أنا بناخذ بريك قصير.
طيب يا شباب، هو بصورة عامة عندكم ساعتين ثيوري وزي ساعة أو ساعتين إذا تريد براكتيكال. الكورس ده ما فيه a lot of practicals، احنا حيكون عندنا 2 سيشن، بعض مرات بيكونوا الاثنين ثيوري، بعض مرات الاثنين بيكونوا براكتيكالز. فنحن في البدايه ما عندنا براكتيكالز، حيكون عندنا كلها ثيوريتيكال سيشن. كل سيشن بيعتبر 2 سيشن، يعني انا حسي مثلا حدرسكم على 2 سيشن، وبالتالي بالنسبه للغياب في ايتش سيشن حنعتبر بس 2 سيشن. يعني انا حسي مثلا اليوم ده بالنسبه للغياب حيعتبر ثيوري، والسيشن الثاني برضه ثيوري. في بعض الايام حيكون في 2 سيشن الاثنين براكتيكالز. فالمعلومه اللي عايز اتصل لكم انه السيشن الغياب حقه ما بيعتبر واحد، بيعتبر اثنين، وغالبا ما بنحتاج للمده الطويله 3 ساعات او 4 ساعات، دي ما بنحتاج لها كلها. السيشن كله بيكون في حدود ساعه ونص لساعتين خلاص. لكن بالنسبه للغياب والحضور عشان الناس بعدين ما يعني تتفاجأ، كل يوم بيعتبر this is يعني 2 session with 2 attendance. واضح يا شباب؟
واضح.
طيب قلنا يا اخواننا عشان نعيش حياة زي ما يقولوا كريمة، لازم الانترنال انفايرمنت حقتنا تكون كونستنت. يعني السوائل حوالين الخلايا لازم تكون عندها درجة حرارة مستقرة، يكون فيها تراكيز النيوترينز مستقرة. إذا حصل changes في الانترنال انفايرمنت أنت بتكون عرضة للمرض وللموت. فأهم حاجة إنه تحافظ على الثبات الداخلي. الثبات الداخلي اللي بيسموه الهوميوستاسيس. فعندنا mechanisms to maintain the consistency of the internal environment. فwhat is the mechanisms that maintain your internal environment? This is بيسموها homeostatic mechanisms. الهوميوستاتيك ميكانيزم حنفصلها حسي ونضرب لها example. The homeostatic mechanism is made of 5 components. الكومبوننت الاول بيسموه الريسبتورز. الريسبتورز او المستقبلات. Then we have the afferents, the centers, the efferents, and the effectors. Usually the effectors will feed back on the receptors. So these are the 5 components of homeostasis. Receptors, sometimes الافرين والافرين مع بعض بيسموها signals. في بعض الكتب تلقى 5 components، في بعض الكتب تلقى 4. اذا قلت 4 components they consider الافرين and efferent دول الاثنين مع بعض بيسموها signals. وحنعرف التفصيل حقها هسه. So we have the receptors, the afferents, the centers, the efferents, the effectors. Usually the effectors will feed back on the receptors. Let us have an example. اخوانا نفتكر او يعني let us consider one who is in hot environment. اذا جلست في صحراء and the temperature is very high. What will happen if you have no homeostasis? If you have no homeostatic mechanism, your body temperature will start to rise until it reaches the temperature of the environment. يعني إذا أنت كنت في صحراء ودرجة الحرارة كانت 45، مفروض تدريجيا درجة الحرارة تتحول من 37 ل 45. لكن actually this will not happen. If it happen, you will die. But fortunately this will not happen because you have homeostatic mechanism. I would like to discuss with you how can I maintain our temperature if you are in hot environment, for example. If you are in hot environment, you have certain type of receptors that detect the temperature. These are called the thermoreceptors. في certain receptors, we call them thermoreceptors. They detect the change in the temperature. So if you are in hot environment, for example, these receptors, the thermoreceptors, will be stimulated. When these receptors are stimulated, they send signals. They send signals through what we call afferent. The signals from receptor to the center is transported by what we call afferents. Okay? So the receptors, the thermoreceptors will send signals through the afferent to the centers. Here, the center is usually found in the brain. For temperature, there is thermoregulatory centers in the brain in area called hypothalamus. In the hypothalamus, there is center there. Its function is to compare the afferent discharge with the normal body temperature, what we call set point. For each parameter in your body, you have set point. For example, the set point for temperature is 37 degrees. The set point for glucose concentration, for example, is about from 70 up to 110 milligram per deciliter. The set point for the pH is about 7.4. So in your body, there is set point, there is normal range for each parameter. The center will compare the afferent discharge with the set point, with the normal range of that parameter. For example, here, if you are in a weather and the receptor, they send discharge, they say that the temperature is, for example, 40 degrees. And the center here knows that the normal temperature is 37. So the center will compare the afferent discharge with the normal range. If there is difference, the center will send corrective signals. It will send corrective signals through the efferents. Through the efferents, the center will send corrective signals to what we call effectors. The effectors are either glands or muscles. In general, the effectors are either glands or muscles. الجلاندز عارفين الجلاندز either exocrine or endocrine. والmuscles is either smooth muscle or cardiac muscle or skeletal muscle. Anyhow, in our example, for example, the receptor, they said that the temperature is 40, so it will be detected by receptors. The afferent discharge will say to the center, the temperature in your periphery is start to rise. It's starting to rise to 40. The normal thing is to 37, so the center will compare the afferent discharge with the normal range. And if there is a difference, in this case, there is 3-degree difference, the center will give discharge to the effectors. What are the effectors in case of thermoregulation? الإفكتر اللي نحتاج لتنظيم درجة الحرارة حاجتين. Number 1 السويت جلاند الغدد العرقية, the sweat gland. So the corrective signal will go to the sweat gland. The sweat gland will start to secrete sweat. The sweat when secreted it will evaporate. عارفين إذا السوائل تبخرت بتسحب معها حرارة. فدرجة الجلد كانت 40, السويتنج will start to evaporate. When it evaporates, you will lose temperature, and the temperature will decrease back to normal. The other effector is a smooth muscle in the vessels. The vessels will dilate. الأوعية الدموية هتتوسع. The blood vessels near the skin will dilate, so the blood flow will increase, and the blood taking temperature to the surface, so the temperature will be lost in the surface in the skin. So this is another mechanism by which you lose heat. So as a result of the corrective signals through the efferent blood vessels, which will dilate, to the sweat gland, which will start to sweat, you will lose temperature. So we start with 40 degrees. By the effectors, the temperature will decrease back to 37 degrees. So if the temperature is back to normal, to 37, this will negatively feed back on the receptors. So the receptor will no longer be stimulated. Why? Because now the temperature is back to normal. This is called the feedback. The feedback, the effect of the effectors on the receptors. Sometimes the effectors will negatively feedback on the receptor, that is to say, it will decrease the action of receptors. Sometimes the effectors will increase the effect of the receptor. This is called the positive feedback. So this is just an example of our homeostatic mechanism. Let us have another example. Let us have another example. For example, there is receptors in the aorta. We call it baroreceptors. We call them baroreceptors. Baro comes from barometric. So the baroreceptor, for example, they detect the change in the blood pressure. For any reason, if your blood pressure starts to increase, there is certain receptors, we call them baroreceptors, they will be stimulated. So this receptor will discharge to the centers. If your blood pressure increase for any reason, your baroreceptors will be stimulated. They will send discharge to the center. Here the center, we call it the heart, we call it the vasomotor centers and the heart centers, or the cardiac centers. So if your blood pressure starts to increase, the discharge will go to the center and they will suppress the heart. So your heart will not contract fastly and the contraction will decrease. So the pumping activity of the heart will decrease. At the same time, the centers will send discharge to the effector. Here the effector number 1, the cardiac muscle. The heart will start to beat slowly and with less force. The second will be the blood vessels will dilate. If your heart starts to beat slowly and your blood vessels dilate, then your blood pressure will decrease. So we start with high blood pressure and we end with low blood pressure. So if your blood pressure is low, is back to normal, there will be no further stimulation of the baroreceptor and your blood pressure will be back to normal. When you study physiology, you will come across several examples of homeostatic mechanisms. This is the usual way to control your different body parameters, your blood pressure, your respiratory rate, your temperature, your pH, your sodium concentration, your potassium concentration. All these are controlled in the body through these homeostatic mechanisms. So the homeostatic mechanism or the homeostasis depend on these 4 or 5 components. The receptors, the signals, which is made of the afferents and efferents, the afferent from receptor to the center and the efferent from centers to effectors. We have the centers, which compare the afferent discharge with the set point, and we have the effectors. زي ما قلنا effectors يا اخواننا يا gland يا muscle بانواعهم المختلفه. So let us discuss this in more detail. The components of homeostasis. These are the structures that enabling homeostasis, that maintain the constancy of the internal environment. They are made of receptors, زي ما قلنا, integrating centers, effectors, and signals. What do we mean by signals? The signal is either afferent signals from center to the from receptor to the centers, or efferent from the centers to the effectors. What is the function of receptors? Is to detect stimuli. Some sensor or detectors. They detect or they sense the change in the internal or external environment. Example of receptors: thermoreceptors, which detect temperature. Chemoreceptors. These receptors, they detect the oxygen concentration, the carbon dioxide concentration, and the pH. And we will study this more in the cardiovascular system and the respiratory system. Baroreceptors, we discussed it before. Baroreceptors, these are receptors that detect the blood pressures. Integrating centers, زي ما قلنا integrating centers, they have to arrange for the appropriate response. For example, if your body temperature starts to rise, the appropriate response is to decrease temperature. If your blood pressure starts to rise, the appropriate response is to decrease blood pressure, and so on. And it is mediated by a certain set of neuronal circuit in the brain. Usually it is found in the brain. Effectors, these are responsible for the responses. As we discussed before, for example, the sweat gland and the blood vessels, these are responsible for the response of decreasing body temperature. The heart and the blood vessels, for example, these are the effectors responsible for decreasing, for example, blood pressure, and so on. زي ما قلنا effectors either muscles or glands. And muscles are either smooth, striated, or cardiac muscle, but glands is either endocrine or exocrine glands. Signals هما الافferent and efferents allow components to communicate either from the receptors to the center or from the center to the effectors. Either output or input, either from receptors to the center بيسموها afferent, or from centers to the effector بيسموها شنو يا اخواننا efferents. Sometimes the signals is not neural, not through nerves. It can be chemical through hormones. So signals can be chemical through hormones or neural signals through nerves. Error signal. What is the error signal? And now we discuss the temperature. For example, if the receptor, they said the temperature is 40 degrees and the set point is, for example, 37. So there is error signal. This is the difference between the afferent discharge and the set point. If you remember a set point, this is the normal range or the normal physiological range of the parameter. For example, for body temperature is about 37, for blood glucose is about 100 milligrams, for the pH is about 7.4. So the set point, this is the normal physiological range or the normal range of the parameter. We should control that parameter within this range. Okay? So an error signal is a difference between what comes from the receptor and the normal set point in your body. So this is what actually happened in what we have discussed before. If your body temperature starts to rise, for example, if there is change in regulated variable, for example, if your body temperature starts to rise, هنا عندك النورمال set point اللي هي 37. The center will compare the afferent discharge with the set point. وحيكون في error signal هيرسل الافكترز. الافكتر if you remember قلنا السويت gland في السكين or blood vessels and so on, and by this you will control your body temperature. If your body temperature is back to normal, this will constitute negative feedback on the receptor. The receptor will no longer be stimulated. Why? Because now the body temperature is back to normal. So this is what actually happened. You have variable, for example, temperature. This is the normal thing. If there is imbalance, for example, if your body temperature starts to rise, what will happen? There will be change or detected in the receptors. The receptor will send discharge to the center. The center will send corrective signals to the effector. This effector will bring the variable back to normal. Another example of homeostatic mechanism: person working outside in hot day. إذا في واحد شغال في hot day, loses body water by evaporation, your body fluid will start to be concentrated. There will be certain receptors that will be stimulated. They will stimulate the thirst center in your brain. You will start to drink water and your body fluid concentration will be back to the original state, back to normal. Usually, في الهوميوستاسيس عندنا external change و internal change. For example في external change مثلا if you are in hot environment. An internal change, for example, if you have low oxygen tension in your blood, for example. Anyhow, there is change in the external environment or internal environment. Usually we have receptors that will detect this change and they will send discharge to the center. The center will bring the condition back to normal. If the homeostatic mechanisms compensate well and the parameter is back to normal, you will be good and well. If your homeostatic mechanism fail to compensate, then you will get the disease and the illness. So usually if your homeostatic mechanism succeed and they bring the condition back to normal, you will be okay, you will be alive and well. But if your homeostatic mechanism fail to compensate, for example, if your homeostatic mechanism fail to compensate to return your body temperature back to normal, then your body temperature will start to rise and you will develop fever, and fever is a sign of a disease. So the usual thing, your homeostasis, your homeostatic mechanism should bring you back to normal. If it fails, you will get illness or disease. اتكلمنا يا اخواننا عن الفيدباك، قلنا في نوعين من الفيدباك ميكانيزمز وهتمر علينا اكزامبلز كثيره. في حاجه بيسموها النيجاتيف فيدباك ميكانيزم ومرت بينا في الاكزامبل اللي فاتت، قلنا اذا بدات بدايه حراره عاليه وانتهيت بدايه حراره طبيعيه، بدايه الحراره الطبيعيه بتخلي الريسبتور از نو لونجر ستيميوليتد ودي بيسموها النيجاتيف فيدباك. So the output shuts off the original stimulus or reduce its intensity. في البداية الريسبتور طلع discharge لأنه البلد بريشر بدأ يزيد for example أو لأنه البلد temperature start to increase. الإفكترز رجعت الكونديشن back to normal so the receptor is no longer stimulated. So if the effectors shut off the effect of the receptors دي بيسموها negative feedback. بيسموها نيجاتيف فيدباك. عكسها وما اخذنا لها اكزامبل لكن حتمر بينا في المستقبل ان شاء الله بيسموها البوزيتيف فيدباك. اذا الافكترز خلت الريسبتور تطلع مور ديسشارج ده بيسموها بوزيتيف فيدباك. بيسموها بوزيتيف فيدباك. وفي اكزامبلز بس ما عاد نزحمكم بالاكزامبلز الكثيره انتوا يا دوب ار ستارتنج، لكن بصوره عامه البوزيتيف فيدباك الاوتبوت او الافكترز بتخلي الاوريجينال ستيمولس تزيد ما بتخليها تنقص، تخلي الاوريجينال ستيمولس تزيد. سو في النيجاتيف فيدباك الافكترز will negative feedback on the receptors so the receptors will no longer be stimulated. شايفين علامه نيجاتيف دي معناتها الريسبتورز will not discharge more to the center. فاذا الافكترز خلت الريسبتورز not to discharge more دي بنسميها نيجاتيف فيدباك. اما اذا الريسبتورز خلت الريسبتورز اذا الافكتورز خلت الريسبتور to discharge more شايفين علامه بوزيتيف. if the effectors they made the receptor to discharge more دي بيسموها positive feedback mechanism. دي بيسموها positive feedback mechanism. So this is finished our lecture today, which introduced the basic aspects of physiology and body functions. So do you have any question?